This past December, I had taken a road trip down to Myrtle Beach with my family. It was myself, my mother, my sister, her husband, and their 2 kids. We had used my car and both my sister and husband's car to transport everything and all of us. We had rented a beach house for a little over a week. We had a pretty great time. I was in the middle of a difficult point in my life, and struggling with employment and being in between jobs, and having just started 2 new jobs fresh. I was a little low on funds and worried about making my car payment and the like. So I opted to head home 2 days early with my car so I could try and get more hours at work. My family expressed being nervous as I planned to leave after dinner and drive through the night to get home. I consoled them that I had been okay to be up all night, and I would head straight home and only stop for gas and food as needed. I'm an excellent driver, a tad impatient, so I tend to go until I absolutely had to stop and take a break. However, this would be a 12-hour trip and I knew that I would need breaks. So I made a point to stop at every rest stop to at least get out and stretch so I stayed awake and didn't get too sore. Going through West Virginia, I'm sure you guys know how secluded their rest stops and visitor centers are, especially when you're heading north from the south and going through the mountains. I stopped at a visitor center because they advertised having a fast food joint and I had to piss like a racehorse. This was sometime very late at night, maybe between 1 and 3 a.m. Side note, that sends shivers down my spine after what happens. I like to drive barefoot, so I pulled in, noticing the buildings with fast food were closed, so I drove around the lot and parked under a streetlight in front of the visitor center so I could use the restroom. Leaning out of my car door, I took my time putting my shoes on to walk inside, having looked around and not seen anything out of the ordinary. I checked my phone and grabbed my wallet before standing up to walk in, making sure my car horn beeped to signal my doors were locked. Walking towards the center, I saw a man in a white hoodie standing at the edge of the sidewalk leading into the center. I didn't think much of it, until I passed him and got an off vibe. I glanced over my shoulder and he was watching me walk in. For some reason, I glanced to my left as I turned back to face forward, and noted another man sitting at the benches that were on the other side of the tall, thin bushes. Instantly, I thought, nope, no way. I went in and I peed, and before I walked out of the bathroom, I called my roommate. As dumb as it was because he was a good 4 or 6 hours away, I just felt safer. I gave him a quick rundown of my situation, and I made him stay on the phone with me. I started to walk out, and I couldn't see the man at the front of the sidewalk anymore. I glanced to mine outright, and saw both men standing next to a bench. Facing forward, I saw a couple walking in to presumably use the restroom as well. I had an impulse to ask them to walk with me, but my paranoia kicked in because I knew something was wrong somewhere in my situation, and I didn't ask, thinking they might know the men. Walking briskly to my car, I explained to my roommate that the men were by the benches, daring the smallest of peeks over my shoulder again. I saw the man in the white hoodie walking towards me, and I told my roommate. Walking a few more paces forward, I looked back and I saw his pace had quickened. At this point, I told my roommate that he's following me to my car and I booked it. I thankfully had a key fob, got my key out and ready, and unlocked my car and practically threw myself in. Not daring to glance back, I threw my car in reverse and gunned it backwards before going back into drive, and I sped off. And I didn't even stop to put my seatbelt on until I was at the exit to leave the parking lot. I didn't look back once. I stopped at the next toll road and filed a report, and the workers called for state troopers to head over and check things out. I didn't stop shaking for hours, and I refused to get out of my car until I was home. I horrified myself at the thought of if those guys had paid attention and made their move more quickly, they could have incapacitated me in my car while I was facing the ground and putting my shoes on, and I would have had no way to stop them. This occurred when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and is a story that I only just recently remembered. It was summertime and my mom was having a garage sale in our driveway. Her, me, and my brother, who was aged about 4 or 5 at the time, and my grandmother, my mom's mom, were all seated inside of the garage during the sale. Me and my brother, of course, had been playing a bit though, running from our yard and then back to our driveway and such. We had a few visitors, but it was one woman who was responsible for this story. She was older, about 70 or something, and walked with a limp. I remembered this because she had a cane. She was on foot and was carrying nothing but a small red toolbox. Not a lunchbox, a literal metal toolbox. She carried things inside of it that you could hear clanging around. My dad had one just like it when I was a kid, that I wasn't allowed to touch because he was a plumber and didn't want me or my brother near his expensive tool sets. So I found it strange that she was just walking around with it. She didn't greet us, she just started picking things up and looking at them. My mom decided to initiate conversation, and this is how it went. "Hey, good morning. Do you have anything for free?" My mom was a bit confused. "Excuse me?" She picked up an item, asking, "I can have this for free." No, sorry. Everything has a sticker on it with a price." "Why is it not free?" "It's a garage sale." "I'm trying to sell things, sorry." It was at this point that the lady went quiet, and my mom just stood up, staring at her. My grandma called me and my brother to sit behind her, and we watched and waited for something else to happen. The woman set her toolbox down on one of our tables and opened it up to reveal a bunch of random things. Little trinkets, loose change, actual tools. She had everything from Kleenex to quarters. It was weird. She motioned towards a small group of figurines my mom was selling and asked if she could have one for free. At this point, my mom was getting annoyed and wanted this lady to leave. She said so, and the woman started walking towards us. She said something about how cute me and my brother were as we sat ducking behind my grandma's chair. She started walking into our garage, and my mom told her to stop and repeated that she should leave. She said something else about me and my brother and asked if we liked her trinkets while she stood staring at us. And my grandma chimed in that she would call the police if the woman didn't leave. She then slowly turned around and walked back to her toolbox, lifting up one of the figurines and very obviously putting it in her box without paying for it. My mom didn't fight her on it, just told her to leave now, and so she did. She wandered up and down our street, away from our driveway but within eyesight. We kept an eye on her for the rest of the day, as she roamed around our neighborhood and surrounding streets until she finally left. It was super weird, and us kids were advised not to leave our garage for the rest of the day. The story continues on to about a week later, when me and my brother were playing outside again. We have landscaping around our house, which are rocks that have flower planters and birdhouses, nothing too spectacular. And it wasn't unusual for me and my brother to climb and stand on the rocks as kids. We started walking around my house to do this, and then went inside to get a drink or something of sort. We weren't gone for more than a few minutes when we came back outside and returned to the exact spot that we had just been in. And I immediately noticed the woman's same bright red toolbox is sitting on top of one of the rocks in our landscape. I ran back inside with my brother and told my parents. My dad went outside to retrieve the toolbox, and it was the same one that the woman had had, with her items still stored inside. I hadn't seen her since the garage left, and still never have. But somehow, she managed to leave that toolbox there without being noticed, which meant that she had to have been watching and waiting for the ideal time. At least that's what I believe. The creepiest part is that our yard is away from our garage. In order to get to that part of our landscaping, you would have to go up our driveway and literally walk across the entire length of our lawn and the front of our house, and then to the side in order to place it there, since we have thick hedges and things blocking the rest of our yard from the public. We have 2 big windows on the front and the side of our house too that were open, which just creeps me out even more when I think that she could have been watching us from the outside. I don't remember what my parents did with the toolbox. I'm pretty sure they threw it away. none of us have ever seen that woman again. And no, there's no chance that we missed the toolbox the first time around. It was bright in color and was literally within our walking path. I noticed it as soon as I turned the corner of our yard. There was no missing it. I don't know what her intentions were, but I'm glad that we haven't encountered her since. This happened in my first year at uni in Australia. I was moving out of home for the first time, and I think this made me very, very naive in this situation. I found a cheap place in the city near my workplace, university at the time. $150 for a room and a share house only 20 minutes out from the CBD. It seemed like an awesome deal to me. I messaged the landlord and told her that I was interested. Before she gave me a time to come and inspect the place, she seemed overly interested in my ethnic background. I'm half Ethiopian, so I definitely don't look white. But when I told her I'm Australian, she suddenly became withdrawn. I thought it was strange. And maybe she thought I was lying because she had seen my profile on flatmates.com. So I explained my background. She seemed dissatisfied with my answer, and we organized a time for me to come see the room. I will call the landlord, Denise. Denise showed me around and talked as if the place was already mine, which I thought was exciting. There was a main house with 5 bedrooms, a caravan on the side, and a granny flat behind it with 3 bedrooms, which is where I would be moving in. The main house and caravan were full, 7 people living there, but only one of the rooms in the granny flat was occupied. It was nice enough considering, and very clean. A weekly cleaner was included in the rent price, as well as weekly maintenance. I didn't think to ask what that meant because I was already preset on moving in. I met the people who would go on to be my housemates. All of them were foreigners, mostly Chinese or South Korean, who had come to study. I still didn't find this odd. I mean, there are plenty of international students here. The door to my room had a lock on it, and I was told only myself and Denise had a key. But Denise never usually came to the house, so there is a nice level of privacy. A week after I moved in, I met the maintenance guy. I'll call him Patrick. He seemed to be gardening and came over to introduce himself. Seemed nice enough. I found out that he's Denise's brother, and he looked to be in his late 40s or so. I found him to be a bit awkward, but I have been raised to be polite to the fault, so I ended up talking to him for a long time before going back to my room. I don't remember what we talked about, but I remember he kept saying things like I was very beautiful, and describing my skin as exotic and caramel more than once, which rubbed me the wrong way. A few days later, the cleaner comes also. She is super lovely and has known Denise and Patrick for a long time. She and I had a nice chat, and for some reason, she brought up that Patrick was on the autism spectrum. So to me, that explained his awkwardness, and I realized he was harmless. So I felt bad about my initial judgment of him. The next time I saw him, I came out into the kitchen and saw him standing there. This struck me as odd. 1, it was the morning. I was in my pajamas, having just woken up. 2, he's the maintenance guy. I didn't understand why he should be inside. But I still felt bad, so I just smiled and said hello. He turned and seemed startled, but explained to me he was just taking out the trash. I saw that he had replaced the bins in the kitchen, so I was just like, okay. He was trying to be nice, I guess. But I told him that he really didn't have to do that. He just kind of insisted, and I was like, alright, whatever. I ended up talking to him again. Again, he seemed to have a weird fixation with me being exotic, even though I had told him I was born in Australia. But mostly, he was just generally asking how I was finding the place, and he reiterated that everything was super safe. And for some reason, he brought up the keys to the bedrooms. He said only me, Denise, and he had keys. I didn't say anything out loud, but in my head I thought, wait, since when does he have a key? But I still kind of brushed it off. Cut to a few months later, I work about 4 to 6 days a week, casually, as well as going to uni for 4 days, so I'm rarely there during the day, and I lock my bedroom door before leaving every day. I don't remember exactly what time of year this would have been, but I know it was colder, and I hadn't used the ceiling fan in my room for a while. I got home and locked my bedroom door, and the ceiling fan was on. This struck me as odd immediately. I knew that I hadn't turned it on in forever. I was very, very confused and thought that I turned it on while leaving, and just didn't remember. I brought it up with my roommate and she just kind of shrugged and said that's odd, but didn't seem weirded out by it, so I figured I was overthinking it. A few weeks later, I'm leaving for work and I have a very strange feeling while walking to the front gate of the house. For some reason, I turn around and I see Patrick, hiding behind some bushes, staring at me. As soon as he is caught, he turns and pretends that he's gardening. In the moment, my mind actually went kind of blank. I was like, surely he wasn't watching me. All I did was frown and wonder to myself why he would stare at me like that, and then pretend that he hadn't been. I come back later in the day, unlock my door, walk in, and again, something is off. But this time, I can't put my finger on it. I stand in my room looking around, staring at everything in the room, but I can't find anything. When I realize that I don't know what I'm looking for, I feel creeped out and I leave my room, and tell my roommate again that I thought someone had been in my room. This time she sat down with me and basically said she thought someone went in her room recently too. We chatted and she said that she had left her bedroom window open when she went to work, and when she came home it was shut. I brought up the fan again, and my roommate said maybe we should let Denise know. So I texted Denise and said something along the lines of, I think someone's been going into my room because of X and X event, and my roommate said the same thing. I exchanged a few messages with Denise, but the general response from her was just, oh wow, that's so bizarre. Again, being super naive, young and too polite for my own good, I assumed that I was overreacting and didn't want to seem like a bad tenant. Thankfully, it turns out Denise was more sympathetic than I realized because she said she was going to have the locks changed the next day. I was like, yay, thanks, and assumed that would be it. But in my head I was thinking, only 3 people have keys, me, Denise, and Patrick, so if someone has been coming in, wouldn't it have been one of us 3? Which is why I didn't feel good when Patrick showed up the next day to change the lock himself, being the maintenance guy and all. I ended up leaving while he did the change, got a text later saying it was done and the new keys were in my mailbox. Fast forward, I had now been at this place for nearly a year. By now, I was aware that Patrick seemed to come over about twice a week, and he always came inside the house to take out the rubbish, but never really seemed to do any maintenance work. I chalked it up to Denise giving him a job because maybe he couldn't find one elsewhere, and I tried to avoid him. As far as I remember, nothing seemed strange until now. I come home from work again and walk into my bedroom. While I'm getting my clothes to shower, I noticed something very, very strange that was definitely not there when I left. There was some whitish pale gunk kind of splattered upwards on the wall and floor. Honestly, my first thought when looking at that after a while was like, that looks like a donut glaze or something. I leaned closer to it, but still didn't really register what the stuff was, only that I definitely hadn't spilled anything there at all. So again, I got creeped, went to the kitchen to grab a Chucks and wipe it up, when I thought like, wait, is that what I think it is? I really didn't know what to look for, but as soon as I had that thought, nothing could convince me otherwise. And again, my door had been locked, only myself, Denise, and Patrick had keys. My roommate wasn't home, but I called Denise right away. She didn't answer, so instead, I messaged her and said basically, someone had been in my room and there was some weird stuff splattered on the wall. I wanted to see if she came to the same conclusion that I did. Her response this time was really off. She messaged back hours later and was dismissive, said something like, "Very bizarre, the lock had been changed though." And I was like, "Yeah, obviously. So who do you think would have been in there?" I felt so weird and grossed out that I went to a friend's place and messaged my stepdad about it. I told him everything for the first time, and I guess it sounds a lot worse all at once because his response was, "Hell no, you're moving out of there." I called Denise and told her I was going to move out if the issue wasn't taken seriously. And this is when I realized that the leasing situation at this place was dodgy, which I didn't know beforehand due to the lack of experience and no sense to ask. Essentially, there was no record of me actually being a tenant, and I was kind of just sending money into this lady's bank account, but there wasn't any official paperwork. I looked back over the stuff I had signed when I initially moved in, and it was typed up by Denise, I assume. I don't remember details, but it wasn't official at all. Super naive. So I was able to move out ASAP. Denise didn't put up a fuss about the short notice, and when I came back the next day, the stuff on the wall was gone, so I didn't have any proof of what had happened. But that just kind of confirmed to me that something weird was going on with Denise and Patrick. My stepdad helped me take all my stuff. I didn't have much. Denise just left a message and said, "Please leave the keys on the counter." It took me a few weeks to process every creepy thing that had happened throughout my stay, and to put it all together as a massive creep fest. My roommate left soon after. Months later, she messaged me to say one of the old housemates told her police were called to the place. I don't know why or what happened, but I suspect it wasn't for the tenants.